Flo in the Mo.
Last week, Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, proposed new legislation in terms of protecting the youth of her province. And to no surprise, the left went full crazy and have been attacking her ever since. So let's just take a look at exactly what she's proposing and what exactly she said.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks to everyone for joining me today. Yesterday, I released a video in which I laid out our government's policy direction on the issues of preserving the choices children have regarding their gender identity until they are mature enough to make them. Policies to better involve parents in their children's education on sensitive issues, and finally, policies addressing the issue of women, girls, and transgender athletes in competitive sports. These are sensitive conversations involving children, and I hope we can depoliticize these issues as much as possible as we work through the process of implementing these policies into law and regulation in a fair and effective way. I want to start by saying that every Albertan who identifies as transgender, I care deeply about your happiness and your well-being. I support you in becoming the person that you want to be or who you already are. And as Premier of this province, I will ensure your rights are always protected. For children who identify as transgender, I want you to also know that these policies are being implemented in order to protect the choices you have regarding altering your physical body until after you've grown mature enough to make such choices safely and with a full understanding of what that means for the rest of your life. These policies include a prohibition on gender reassignment surgeries for minors aged 17 and under. For children aged 15 and under, puberty blockers and hormone therapies for the purpose of gender reassignment will also not be permitted, with the exception of those who've already commenced their treatment at this time. For minors aged 16 and 17 who wish to start hormone therapies for gender reassignment purposes, this will be permitted with parental physician and psychologist approval and consent. Alberta's government is also working to attract specialists in gender reassignment surgeries and care to Alberta to assist adults who have a wish to transition, and we plan to build a private registry of these experts to support their lifelong health needs. In our classrooms, we will ensure discussions about gender identity and other sensitive subjects happen at the right time and with the parent-child relationship at its core. This will include a parental opt-in consent requirement when teachers plan to discuss subject matter related to gender identity, sexual orientation, or sexuality for K-12 students. Further, children aged 15 and under will require parental notification and consent before their name or pronouns are changed in school. For minors aged 16 and 17, parental consent won't be required for this, but parents will have to be notified. We will support families with a new pilot program to provide counseling services for families in need to assist with navigating these issues together. In rare circumstances, when transgender children experience an abusive parent, there are, of course, child protection laws that will be enforced. And lastly, we are implementing policies to protect fairness and safety in women's and girls' sports. We will work with sporting organizations to ensure that women and girls have a choice to participate in competitive sport without having to compete against biologically stronger transgender women athletes, while also ensuring that we work with those same organizations to expand co-ed and gender-neutral categories so that every transgender athlete can meaningfully participate in the sports that they love. Gender identity can be a very emotional issue, especially in the context of children. And as we move forward developing and implementing these policies into law, I hope we can depoliticize the issue as much as possible and focus on the well-being of the children involved. Thank you. I'd be happy to take questions.
So I want to preface with the fact that Danielle Smith won the most recent election in Alberta versus socialist Rachel Notley. Alberta is and has always been historically a conservative province. That's because the Albertans appreciate their individual sovereignty without Ottawa and the members of parliament there telling them what to do. They want to take advantage of all the natural resources they have and just support traditional Canadian values. Ergo, they elected someone to represent them, which is Danielle Smith. Now, the things that she's proposing in terms of hormone therapy and surgeries is actually a pretty common sense proposal. The fact that she's making these decisions for children when they get to the age of 17 to start making these big decisions is not something that warrants frustration. I mean, if you take a look at the age that you need to drink in Alberta, smoke, join the army, age of consent, they are all over the age of prescribing gender hormone surgeries or pills. So if the Canadians deem that an individual is not old enough, mature enough to be able to drink responsibly, smoke responsibly, or join the army, how can you then argue that at under 17 they can make life-changing decisions on their body? I mean, it's pretty common sense that that's not a good idea. We also need to take a look at why there's this movement right now of this trans movement, which hasn't really existed up until pretty recently. So the argument could be made that there's a lot of influences going on right now that are pushing kids, confused kids, to make decisions that you can't turn back on later in life. Danielle makes a comment about a potential mother that would like to have a kid and breastfeed their kid if they've made a decision at 14, 15, 16, a girl to change to a boy. That's completely out of the books. I mean, it's the surgeries and the doctors and the teachers that are promoting these decisions to these kids, in my opinion, will go down as one of the largest crimes against humanity. I mean, it's pushing these ideas on kids that they can change the sex of who they are. A is wrong, and B, it will not make them happy. There's a reason why people are wanting to transition after they've transitioned. There's a pretty high percentage that people want to reverse the decisions they've done. And B, the mental health and suicide rate is very high, which goes to show that committing these physical surgeries doesn't actually solve the spiritual issues is what is actually going on inside of these individuals. There's definitely something very nefarious about people wanting kids to do these life-altering decisions to their body. This isn't a political statement. This is just Danielle Smith wanting to implement regulations and laws that allow an individual to wait till an older age to truly make a decision such as this. And there should be no opposition from anyone for something like this. And then let's hear our Canadian joke of a leader give his opinions on what Danielle Smith just talked about.
Canadian parents love their kids, and we want the very best for them, and we want them to be kept safe. LGBT youth across this country are among the most vulnerable to homelessness, to suicide, to a range of things that can harm them. We need to be there to defend them. We need to be there to protect them. And I know Canadians across the country are doing just that. It is telling that the week after welcoming far-right American conservative Tucker Carlson to her province.
Well, there you go already. In my last video, I talked about how Tucker Carlson came up to visit and give a talk to Danielle Smith and fellow Albertans. And I said that the reaction by the Liberals would be that the narrative is some far-right extreme individual came up here to cause mayhem, chaos, blah, blah, blah. And word for word, that's exactly what he said. It's not surprising anymore. It's very predictable.
Sit with him on stage. Danielle Smith has now moved forward with the most anti-LGBT policies of anywhere in the country. Canadians need to know that the federal government and all Canadians will be there to protect youth. As a federal government, we will always be there to protect the most vulnerable, particularly vulnerable LGBT.
And this is part of this whole false idea that it's the job of the federal government to come in and protect your families. Your best interest is not what the federal government has in mind whatsoever. I mean, just look at the state of affairs for all Canadians right now since Trudeau took office. I can't think of one positive thing in the last 8 years that we have benefited from in his leadership.
Youth who need to know that there are people across the country there to fight for them. If Premier Smith wants to fight someone, stand with us and fight for Canadians on lower grocery prices, on affordable fuel, on more housing, on
Affordable fuel. I mean, that's absolutely hilarious. Alberta has tons of oil. They want to use their own resources, which is what Danielle is actually kickstarting. So by producing more oil, that's going to lead to cheaper fuel. So she's already doing what he's claiming to want her to do. Not through carbon taxes, not through carbon tax 2, 3, 4, which is what the federal government is doing, using Canadian oil and refining it will make it cheaper for all Canadians.
On fighting climate change. Fight with us to defend the rights of vulnerable Canadians. Don't fight against vulnerable LGBT youth.
I mean, again, there's no surprise that the left is going to go after anything of conservative values. And I don't understand how protecting a young, vulnerable individual from making decisions that will change the rest of their life is harming them. Again, the doctors and the teachers and even the parents that are promoting their own children to make irreversible changes will go down as the biggest crime against humanity that we've ever seen. Followed second closely by the COVID pandemic that we apparently had and the abuse of our rights and freedoms that ensued. That should be definitely a close second. Well, everyone would like to wrap up here, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts on the matter. And catch you next time. Peace.
The Flow and the Mo.